Yet, at number 27 Belgrave Square, another sound intruded on the hour. The sharp, ringing shatter of glass, followed by a single, short scream that ended abruptly, as though choked mid-breath. It was not the kind of scream born of surprise. It resembled the strained cry of someone trying to speak through sudden pain. The household had grown accustomed to late-night noises. The master of the townhouse, Sir Reginald Hargrave, was known for restless habits, unpredictable temper, and solitary midnight reading. Still, the butler, Mr. Jonas Elmsley, felt a chill cut through him as he stood outside the study door, tray in hand. What he had heard was distinctly wrong, too sharp to be a stumble, too human to ignore. He knocked. No answer. Again, silence, except for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock that dominated the hall. Elmsley turned the brass doorknob, hesitating only when he remembered, with a ripple of dread, that Sir Reginald had forbidden anyone from entering his study uninvited. But the house seemed to hold its breath, and duty pushed aside fear. The study door opened. The smell hit first. Port, ink, and something acrid beneath it, faint, almost ghostly, but unmistakably chemical. Sir Reginald sat slumped at his polished mahogany desk, like a puppet whose strings had been cleanly cut. His glass of port lay shattered at his feet, the crimson liquid seeping into the Turkish rug like spilled blood. One hand rested limp beside the decanter. The other clutched a letter so tightly that the paper was creased beneath stiff fingers. His head was tilted slightly to the right, his dead eyes fixed on a portrait above the fireplace. A painting of Lady Evelyn Hargrave, his wife. The expression on his frozen features was neither pain nor fear, but a kind of grim resignation, as though he had seen something inevitable coming and accepted it too late. Elmsley's gasp pulled other footsteps to the doorway. The housekeeper, Mrs. Dorothea Riving, a sharp-eyed woman whose heartiness masked growing anxiety, pressed a hand to her chest. Lady Evelyn's voice, small and tight, echoed from further down the bare stairs, asking what had happened. Her worry was thick with controlled terror, as though she expected tragedy and merely awaited its arrival. No one responded to her. They simply stared at Sir Reginald's corpse. London's authorities were summoned, and within the hour, Inspector James Japp arrived, his familiar stride cutting through the household's grief with businesslike authority. Yet he was not alone. Behind him stood a small, meticulous man with immaculately waxed moustaches, a cane held lightly in his gloved hand, his eyes shining with contained energy and precision. Hercule Poirot stepped forward into the study, tilting his head like an appraiser examining a priceless artifact. Although his gaze bore something deeper, curiosity sharpened to a near weapon. "Monsieur Poirot," Japp said with a weary shake of his head, "I do not pick favourites, but I believe we will need the little grey cells this time." Poirot's moustache twitched with amusement. "You flatter them, mon ami. I hope they shall justify your faith." He stepped closer to the body, his movements delicate, almost reverent. Poirot did not touch yet, he observed. The port glass had shattered, yes, but the decanter was untouched. The study chair appeared undisturbed, the rug unwrinkled, the desk immaculate save for the letter in Sir Reginald's hand and a smudge of red across a drawer handle. Not blood but paint, dry and vibrant, as though placed accidentally by an artistic finger. "You did not find him breathing, no?" Poirot asked Elmsley quietly. "No, sir. He was quite gone. I heard a noise. I came to check." "And what noise did you hear?" Poirot leaned in, probing not just fact but tone. "A crash, sir. The glass, I assume. And a cry. short, not like he was calling for help, more shocked. Poirot nodded. He moved toward the corpse, inhaling the faint but unmistakable scent beneath the sweetness of port. Bitter almonds, cyanide, a poison that kills quickly, violently, and without a drop of disturbance. So why, Poirot wondered, was the scene so terribly orderly? Sir Reginald's posture lacked the tension of someone dying in agony. Cyanide victims often convulsed, contorted. Hargrave, instead, seemed almost at peace. His lips were only faintly parted, his jaw relaxed. A curious contradiction, unless administered very carefully, unless deliberately dosed. Poirot raised Sir Reginald's right wrist lightly with a pencil, noting no bruise, no sign of force. He observed the man's fingertips, stained faintly, almost imperceptibly, with ink, as though he had pressed down hard on the letter he still clutched. The fingers had stiffened around it like iron. Poirot inclined his head. "Inspector, do you see?" Japp squinted. "Ink on the fingers. He was writing something, maybe." Poirot's brow arched. Or attempting to keep something from being taken. He turned the paper slowly. The edges were intact except for one corner, torn, away too neatly to have occurred in panic. Someone must have removed it before the rigor mortis set in. The letter contained several lines in an uneven hand, shaky, emotional writing. "You have left me no choice. If you continue with this matter, you will suffer the consequences. Forgive me, but there is no other way." The signature space was empty, not blank, torn clean away. Poirot observed Lady Evelyn, who now stood at the doorway, dressed in a silk robe, her hair hastily pinned. She gazed at her husband not with horror, but with a kind of distant devastation, as though grief had frozen into something colder. "You did not enter the room earlier, madame?" Poirot asked gently. "No." Her throat tightened. "He ordered us all to leave him alone tonight." Poirot's eyebrows rose, interested not so much in her words as in the way she said them. Orders to be alone suggested secrecy. Yet his solitude had not protected him. It had killed him. Japp cleared his throat. "We'll need to question everyone. Staff first." Poirot raised a finger. "You will forgive me, Inspector, but for once I propose that we do not start with the servants." Elmsley visibly relaxed, thinking himself dismissed from suspicion, but Poirot's eyes were not on him. They were on the mantelpiece above the fire, where a scattering of ash seemed disturbed. Poirot bent, using the blunt edge of a letter opener to lift a charred scrap from the grate. A fragment of paper, faintly written on. Perhaps a second document partially burned. Not just one letter. There had been more written tonight. Poirot turned slowly to face the widow. "Tell me, Lady Hargrave, when did your husband last receive correspondence?" Her face whitened subtly, though she hid it well. Sir Reginald received letters daily, most of them, unpleasant, business matters. Ah, Poirot thought, business that stirred emotions strong enough to leave scratches of ink beneath dead fingernails. Poirot turned toward the others gathering behind her. 3 anxious faces watched from the stairway landing. Charles Linton, Sir Reginald's business partner, gaunt and iron-haired. Beatrice Hargrave, the young cousin who had lived with the couple these past 5 months, delicate and persistently nervous. And Lucien Varlet, a French painter invited by Sir Reginald to reside as a creative lodger, his hands stained with faint crimson from pigments, his eyes calculating yet sorrowed. Poirot let his gaze linger on Varlet's hands, which bore the same hue as the smear on the drawer handle. Not blood, but paint. A careless detail, or a deliberate one. Monsieur Varlet, Poirot asked softly. "You were working tonight?" "Yes," Varlet replied, voice low. "I paint late. It is when truth comes out of colour." "How poetic," Poirot murmured. "And were you in the study earlier?" Varlet shrugged. "Sir Reginald allowed me to borrow quiet there, earlier in the evening. I only sought stillness, nothing more." Poirot nodded, but the thought lodged itself. Paint on handle, paint on fingers, and the letter torn. Someone had touched that desk before Sir Reginald sealed his fate. Yet Poirot believed already. The true poison was not in the port glass. It lingered in secrets, spilled in ink, and scorched at the edges of burned parchment. He closed Sir Reginald's eyes gently, not from sentiment, but to remove their accusatory glare from the room. "Inspector Japp," he said softly, "we stand not merely before death. We stand at the edge of a story that someone tried to erase." Poirot turned to the widow, the guests the trembling butler. "Tonight, mon ami, nothing is as simple as it appears. The poison speaks of calculation, not passion. There is no struggle, only certainty." Japp frowned. "So you think this was premeditated?" Poirot smiled faintly. "I think, my friend, that this murder began long before tonight, and that it was written before it was done." He tapped the letter gently. "This is not a confession. It is a judgment. And the hand that judged believed it had no other choice." The fog outside deepened, cloaking London in secrecy. Inside number 27 Belgrave Square, the air thickened with unspoken guilt, fragile alliances, and quiet despair. Poirot's eyes swept one last time across the room. At the dead man, at the burning hearth, at the crimson paint drying like newly spilled blood. He closed his notebook. "The question, Inspector, is not who killed Sir Reginald. The question is, whom did he sentence first?" Chapter 2. The House of Silenced Motives. A thin winter sun filtered through the curtains of number 27 Belgrave Square, its light pale and reluctant, as though unwilling to illuminate the sorrow it found. London seemed unbothered by the tragedy, the rumbling buses and clattering hooves marching past with indifferent rhythm. Yet, inside the townhouse, the grief had settled thickly, a heavy film clinging to the chandeliers. To the stair banisters polished the previous night, to the portraits staring mutely from the walls. Lady Evelyn Hargrave did not sleep. When dawn arrived like a ghost lifting dark curtains, she was already seated in the music room, staring at the grand piano she had not played for weeks. A faint tremble haunted her fingers as though they remembered the piano keys but refused to touch them. She wore a simple grey gown now, stripped of the silk of the previous night, her face pale beneath a veil of exhaustion. Grief had not yet found her tears. Instead it lingered as numbness, punctuated by fear. A knock on the door made her flinch. "May I?" Inspector Japp's voice cut through the heavy stillness. He entered, hat in hand, with Poirot just behind him. Poirot bowed his head with courteous solemnity. "Madame, forgive us for disturbing your morning. We would not impose if the matter were not urgent." She nodded softly, her posture stiff yet composed. "I understand. Please sit." Japp cleared his throat, his bluntness softened slightly by respect. "We must make inquiries as soon as the morning comes, while memories are fresh." Poirot's eyes drifted over the room. Small details spoke. A scattered collection of sheet music abandoned weeks ago. A music box half opened. An unfinished needlepoint piece depicting a rose whose stem was incomplete. Everything in this house felt suspended, as if no one had dared finish anything for fear of consequences. "Mourners often erase truth with time," Poirot said gently. "Memory rearranges itself to protect. That is why we speak now." Lady Evelyn nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "Ask what you must." Poirot clasped his hands, elbows perched lightly on his cane. "Last night, your husband received correspondence. You said it concerned business matters. Would you elaborate?" She hesitated, only slightly, but Poirot caught it as though watching a chess opponent hover before sacrificing a queen. Sir Reginald was involved in a large investment deal. A risky one, many said. He disagreed. Some believed it would bankrupt him. Others believed it would make him even more powerful. There was tension. Tension with whom? Japp interjected. Primarily with Mr. Charles Linton, his business partner, and with several investors. Sir Reginald received threats, written ones. I urged him to step away, but... She looked toward the piano, where reflections of chandelier crystals quivered upon polished black wood. He never listened. Poirot considered her tone, not the content, but its weary acceptance, as if she had pleaded this point too many times. Did you see these threats? Only some. He burned many. He believed that showing fear to a threat gave it power. He said that business is war, and in war, one must not reveal weakness. Japp grunted. Sounds like a stubborn fellow. Poirot offered a polite shrug. Perhaps Inspector, or perhaps the monsieur feared more than business failure. Lady Evelyn's eyes shifted sharply, too sharply. Poirot noted the flicker. Fear not of ruin, but of exposure. He changed direction with delicate subtlety. And your marriage, madame, it was content? She froze, not shocked by the question itself, but surprised that he asked it so soon. The little grey cells demanded no delay. We were respectful, she said carefully. Sir Reginald was not unkind, but his duty came first, and affection second. Poirot nodded sympathetically. Respect without warmth, then. A marriage of duty, not of hearts. She swallowed, unable or unwilling to dissent. That is common in our society, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, Poirot agreed softly, but not all such marriages produce threats to be burned quietly in the night. He stood, signalling the end of questioning. Merci, madame. We will speak again. As they left, Japp muttered, She's hiding something. You heard it, didn't you? Poirot did not look away from the hallway lined with family portraits, all stiff and formidable. Everyone in that house is hiding something, mon ami. The question is, who hides murder, and who hides merely shame? In the conservatory, the butler Jonas Elmsley waited, his manner immaculate, though fatigue clung to his eyes. Poirot greeted him warmly, not like interrogator to suspect, but as fellow observer of human folly. Monsieur Elmsley, Poirot asked, you have served the Hargraves many years? 15, sir, Elmsley answered with quiet pride. I entered service when Lady Evelyn married into the house. And Sir Reginald? Did he trust you? He relied on me, Elmsley corrected gently. Trust was something he reserved for very few. Who then? Poirot leaned slightly forward. Elmsley's mouth tightened, not in secrecy but in caution. Sir Reginald trusted no one entirely, not even Lady Evelyn. He kept certain matters only for himself. Documents, letters. He would lock them away in his study or burn them in the fireplace. Poirot felt the quiet weight of that word. Burn. Again fire. Again secrets set aflame. And the painter, Monsieur Varlet? Poirot asked casually. Why invite a stranger into a house so guarded? Elmsley hesitated again. Sir Reginald admired Lucien Varlet's portraits. He believed the man could capture truth others missed. He thought Varlet would paint the perfect likeness of Lady Evelyn, one that revealed her inner strength. Poirot gave a slight smile. Truth on canvas, ah? Dangerous. Elmsley's throat tightened. Sir Reginald had grown possessive of that idea. And Madame, did she approve of being painted? Elmsley looked away. She never posed. Once more, Poirot filed away the silence that spoke louder than words. He thanked Elmsley and motioned for the next witness. Beatrice Hargrave entered nervously, clutching a handkerchief so tightly that her knuckles whitened. Young, perhaps 20, with bright curls and timid eyes, she seemed the very image of vulnerability. Yet Poirot noticed immediately how her gaze darted, how quickly she assessed both detectives before sitting back straight, chin slightly lifted. A frightened mouse, or a careful strategist. "Beatrice," Japp began kindly, "you lived here. How long?" "Since June," she whispered. "Sir Reginald invited me after my father died. He was generous." Poirot caught the hesitation. Generosity sometimes masked something else. Obligation, guilt, control. "You were close to Sir Reginald?" Poirot pressed lightly. She straightened her spine even more. "He treated me like family." "Did he support you financially?" Her eyes flickered. "Only out of kindness." Poirot's brows lifted. Kindness without condition? She clenched the handkerchief harder. Sir Reginald had expectations of loyalty, but I was grateful to him. Lady Evelyn was kind to me. I owed them both. Poirot noticed that her voice cracked not with grief, but with fear of implication. "And last night," he said gently, "what did you hear?" She shook her head. "I retired early. I heard nothing until Mrs. Riving screamed. I could not—" Her voice choked, but the question lingered. Could not, or did not wish to speak. Poirot did not press further. Sometimes silence revealed more than words. Finally, the painter entered. Lucien Varlet wore a smock still marked by dried paint, crimson and cobalt streaks across the chest like battlefield scars. His eyes were deep-set, intense, brooding, not mournful, but contemplative. He bowed politely, with a heaviness that felt part guilt, part sorrow. "You wish to know if I killed Sir Reginald," he said flatly, before either detective spoke. Poirot smiled politely. "I wish to know only who was near him, and why." Varlet leaned back, gaze distant. "I worked in the study earlier, yes. Sir Reginald liked my presence. He said that a painter sees lies as colours. He believed I could tell him things about people he could not see himself." Poirot nodded. "But last night, did he speak to you? Did he ask your counsel?" Varlet inhaled slowly. "He asked me whether truth could be painted out of someone, whether guilt could be exposed with brushstrokes." Poirot felt a spark in his little grey cells. Reginald Hargrave had wanted not a portrait. He wanted revelation, or perhaps confession. "And what did you tell him?" Poirot asked softly. Varlet's voice grew haunted. "I told him truth is not created by paint. It exists already. A portrait only forces others to see it." He grew agitated. He said he must bring out the truth soon before it is too late. Poirot leaned forward. "Truth about whom?" Varlet's lips tightened. "He did not say, but he spoke as if he were at war, a personal war." Poirot let the silence linger. "Did you notice anything else?" Varlet hesitated, then confessed, "There was a letter on the desk when I left. Sir Reginald was trembling. I believe he was preparing to send it or destroy it. I do not know which he chose." Poirot nodded. "And your fingerprints are on the desk drawer, because—" Varlet seemed surprised but not defensive. "I needed charcoal pencils. Hargrave permitted me to take them from the drawer." Poirot made note of his transparency. Either an honest artist or a shameless liar. As Varlet departed, Japp sighed. "Everyone's nervous. Could be guilt. Could just be fear of your moustache." Poirot chuckled softly, but his eyes were sharp, alive with connections forming. Do you not see, mon ami? Hargrave was preparing to reveal something. He challenged someone. He intended to expose a truth, and they silenced him. A blackmailer? A whistleblower? Japp pressed. Poirot shook his head. Not so crude. A personal matter, something within these walls. Japp frowned. But if Hargrave was blackmailing someone? Poirot turned to face the staircase, where portraits loomed like silent witnesses. Then the letter we saw was not the beginning of that story. It was the end. He moved toward the study once more. Reginald Hargrave was not a victim of his enemies. He was a victim of someone he believed he controlled. And as Poirot opened the door, the scent of bitter almonds seemed stronger, as though the room itself was speaking. Truth was coming. Someone stopped it. Poirot looked at the empty chair behind the desk. Someone here feared exposure more than they feared murder. And that, Inspector, is the most dangerous motive of all. Chapter 3. A Woman in Mourning. The next evening settled over London like a bruised sky, its velvet darkness swallowing the last remnants of daylight. Street lamps glimmered faintly in the mist, casting a spectral glow across the quiet lanes near Norfolk Square. Hercule Poirot stood at the polished iron gate of the Ravenshaw townhouse, his gloved hand poised with deliberate grace as he contemplated the turbulent household within. Sergeant Flint, ushering him forward, wore an expression caught between irritation and curiosity. The detective, however, walked with serene confidence, as though the crime itself awaited to confess. Inside, the grief of the household lived like a heavy fragrance, quiet, oppressive, and perfumed with despair. The grand sitting room, rearranged by distress, bore a solemn tension. At its centre sat Eleanor Ravenshaw, widow of the late Lord Alistair. She was tall, elegant even in anguish, wrapped in satin mourning black. The diamonds at her throat shimmered defiantly, as though refusing to surrender their brilliance to sorrow. She raised her eyes, red from weeping yet strangely composed. "You are Hercule Poirot?" she asked, her voice delicate but cold, as if pain had frozen into formality. "Oui, madame," he replied with a bow. "I am honoured to offer assistance in this difficult hour." Eleanor studied him with fragile curiosity. "A difficult hour is too gentle a phrase," she murmured. "This house has become accursed." Poirot seated himself opposite her, taking note of the immaculate order. The cushions aligned, the tea set untouched, and not a hair astray from her sculpted curls. This was not the room of a woman shattered. It was the chamber of someone who refused to lose control. "Madame," Poirot began softly, "I understand you were away at the moment of your husband's death." "Yes," Eleanor answered, her gaze faltering. "I was at a charity soirée in Bayswater. My maid accompanied me. You may confirm the time with her." There was a rigidity about her, a need to insist upon innocence before question. Poirot tucked that away in his mind. "And his health?" he asked. "Was your husband ill?" "Not in the slightest," she replied bitterly. "He was vigorous, too vigorous. Drinks, cards, meetings at dubious hours. I sometimes wondered whether, instead of death, he would return home with bullets in his chest." She gave a faint, humorless laugh, then covered her eyes. Poirot leaned forward. "You suggest dangers, madame. Why would your husband be exposed to such?" She withdrew her hand slowly, her composure restored. "He made enemies, business, politics, and perhaps something more personal." A pause. "I do not pretend to know all he did. I was his wife, not his confessor." Poirot studied her words, but more than that, he studied the silences between them. Eleanor Ravenshaw was not a woman given to ignorance. Her cold poise belied knowledge. It implied secrets she would rather bury beneath veils of grief. At that moment, Marcus Ellery, the firm's senior partner, entered the room. His round spectacles gleamed under the chandelier. His expression was tight, defensive. He bowed cordially, but watched Eleanor with peculiar alertness. "Madame Ravenshaw must rest," he insisted. "Such interrogation is intolerable." Poirot rose courteously. "I merely gather impressions, monsieur, not answers, not yet." Marcus stiffened. "You may find your impressions misleading." Poirot smiled gently. "But that is the beauty, monsieur. They are mine to arrange." Marcus's jaw tightened, understanding the challenge hidden within polite words. Heiress and lawyer both cloaked themselves in propriety, yet it was propriety bursting at the seams. Before departing, Poirot turned to Eleanor once more. "Madame, one last question. Did your husband keep a personal safe in the house?" Her eyes flickered. The first true crack. "Yes, in his study." "And last night, before his death, was it locked?" I believe so," she answered after a fraction too long. Poirot bowed and followed Sergeant Flint toward the hallway. Behind him, Eleanor Ravenshaw clutched her carefully folded handkerchief with such force that the fabric trembled. Whether from grief or fear, he could not yet say. Outside, the damp London air pressed against Poirot's face. He breathed it in, his moustache twitching as though tasting the truth. Flint cleared his throat, exasperated. "You think the widow's involved?" he asked bluntly. Poirot raised a finger. "Non, mon ami. Do not be hasty. She is grieving, but not helpless. She is hiding something, yes, but whether it is guilt or protection, that will require the little grey cells." "And the lawyer?" Flint nudged. Poirot's gaze lingered on the glowing window of the sitting room. "Ah, Marcus Ellery. There is a man who knows too much and says too little. Such a man rarely speaks silence without reason." As they walked down the street, Poirot paused beneath a lamp-post, its light glimmering across his shoes. "We must inspect the safe, and we must speak to the maid. Also, Flint, fetch the doctor's final report, not the summary. I desire the precise wording concerning the nature of death." Flint frowned. "Why, it was poisoning. Everyone knows that." Poirot stared forward, his eyes reflecting the lamplight like polished gems. Yes, but the poison was not ordinary. And if the poison was not ordinary, neither was the murderer. The fog curled like smoke around his figure as the detective stepped onward, mind sharpening, heart steady. Somewhere behind velvet curtains and polished smiles, danger watched quietly, waiting to be revealed. The London mist closed around him like a whisper, and Poirot whispered back, "The truth approaches." Chapter 4. The Locked Safe and the Missing Paper. The morning broke with a shade of pewter grey, London's sky heavy as though weighted by secrets yet to fall. Hercule Poirot, punctual as ever, returned to the Ravenshaw townhouse, armed with determination and a pair of unusually polished shoes. The butler, stiff and silent, led him to Lord Alister's private study, a room that bore the scent of leather pipe smoke and heavy calculations. It was a chamber of secrecy. The curtains hung like thick cloaks. Its desk sprawled with documents, but none disorderly. Everything was measured, precise, intentionally arranged. Poirot's gaze was drawn not to the desk, nor to the portrait of Lord Alister's forebears glowering down upon them, but to a polished mahogany cabinet at the far right. The personal safe. Sergeant Flint, already present, tapped it impatiently. "There it is, and here's the locksmith to open it. The widow didn't know the combination." Poirot arched a brow. "She said so, yes, but whether she knew and pretended otherwise, that is another story entirely." The locksmith worked quickly. Within minutes, the safe creaked open with a reluctant metallic sigh. Flint leaned forward eagerly, Poirot calmly. Inside sat documents stacked in meticulous order, a velvet box of rare cufflinks, several sealed envelopes, and a shookdak. Most curious, a space that appeared recently emptied. Poirot immediately noticed the absence. "You see, mon ami, the dust does not lie," Flint squinted. "Dust. Oui, the fine grey outline of a folded paper, its edges marked clearly. Something was removed very recently, within perhaps hours before death." Poirot lightly traced the dust-framed space. Lord Ravenshaw had something here, something he feared would be stolen, or perhaps something he wished to keep from someone close. Flint muttered, "Or someone stole it after he died." Poirot shook his head. "No, the time does not fit. Had one searched the safe after death, chaos would remain, ransacking, disorder. But this missing document was removed with care, before or precisely at the time of his death." He turned to the documents remaining. Letters concerning business interests, a few private correspondences, and one peculiar envelope marked "to be opened only in the event of my death." Flint whistled. "Shall we open that?" Poirot regarded it, thoughtfully. "Not yet. A document to be opened only after death implies anticipation. But anticipation of natural demise?" He shook his head gently. "No, Lord Ravenshaw expected danger." Poirot's eyes moved to the desk. There was a fountain pen, gleaming despite dried ink at its nib. A blotting paper bore a faint imprint, a few fragmented words. Poirot brought the paper to the light, tilting it precisely. The imprint became partially legible. "Betrayal. The committee. Danger. Ellery must not—" "Ellery," Flint muttered. "That's the lawyer." Poirot nodded. "And partner, and possibly a man with much to gain." Suddenly, the door swung open. Marcus Ellery entered, breath short, face pale. "I was told you would be examining personal documents. I must insist—" Poirot interrupted without looking up. "Monsieur Ellery, your insistence is understood, yet your agitation speaks far louder." Ellery stiffened. "I am protecting privacy." "Privacy of whom?" Poirot asked gently. "Your dead partner? Or yourself?" Ellery's face flushed, his voice tightening. "You insult me, monsieur." Poirot smiled. "Pas du tout. I merely observe." Ellery moved toward the safe, but Poirot stepped subtly into his path. "One question, monsieur. Did Lord Ravenshaw ever discuss matters concerning a committee?" A flicker, small but bright with tension. "He was a member of several parliamentary circles, yes. Nothing unusual." "Unusual enough to be dangerous?" Ellery swallowed, then spoke with forced calm. "His interests were broad. Wealth attracts enemies, Monsieur Poirot. It creates rivals, political or personal. Surely you realize that." Poirot inclined his head. "Just so. But wealth also gives motive, does it not?" Ellery turned to leave, pausing at the threshold. His voice softened, but trembled at the edges. "Whatever Lord Ravenshaw hid, he hid it because he refused to compromise. That is why he is dead. And that is all I shall say." When he was gone, Flint exhaled irritably. "He knows something." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No, he knows many things. The question, mon ami, is which truth frightens him most?" Poirot reached once more for the envelope marked for death, but hesitated, as though waiting for the document to reveal its own secrets. "We will open it soon, but first—" He knelt beside the safe door, touching a faint smudge of oil at its hinge. "See, it was opened recently, not by force, but by someone who knew the combination." Flint blinked. "Someone from inside the house." "Exactement. Poirot stood. Only one who fears a secret steals gently. Only one who knows steals early. And only one who panics at discovery barges in, as Monsieur Ellery just did. Flint frowned. So is Ellery the killer. Poirot smiled softly. Patience! A murderer is patient, so we must be patient also. For now, we follow the missing document. He looked at the safe again, a whisper of dust still framing the absence like a ghost. And when we find it, Poirot murmured, we will find the motive. And then the murderer will stand alone. Chapter 5. The maid's tearful testimony. Rain drizzled against the townhouse windows like soft fingertips tapping for entry. Hercule Poirot stood in a narrow corridor that led to the servants' quarters, where the scent of starch, soap, and modest living clung tightly to the air. His polished shoes seemed almost out of place among the faded carpet and low lamps, but his presence carried the quiet severity of purpose. At the end of the corridor, seated on a plain wooden chair, was Clara Whitby, Lady Eleanor's maid. A girl of no more than 22, she possessed an anxious delicacy, her reddish hair loosely pinned, her fingers nervously wringing a handkerchief. When she lifted her eyes to Poirot, they shimmered with panic, relief and fear all braided together. Sergeant Flint stood nearby like a looming gargoyle. Poirot approached gently, his voice warm. "Mademoiselle, I am Hercule Poirot. I seek only truth, not torment. You have suffered as well, I suspect." A tremor passed through her. I only wish to serve my lady. I want no trouble." "A most admirable wish," Poirot replied kindly, "and to serve her truly, one must sometimes speak what one fears." Clara swallowed. "I will try, sir." Poirot sat opposite her, folding his gloved hands. "You accompanied Lady Eleanor to Bayswater on the night of Lord Ravenshaw's death, oui?" "Yes. We left at 8:30. Returned shortly after 1. The house was already so quiet. And Lady Eleanor did not return to the study at any point before leaving?" "No, sir. She was in her room preparing for the evening. I dressed her hair myself. She looked so beautiful. She wanted to make an impression that night." Clara's voice softened into admiration tinged with something deeper, loyalty. Poirot nodded. "Did Lord Ravenshaw speak to her before she departed?" A pause. Clara's hand tightened around the handkerchief. "Yes, sir. They spoke, and argued." Poirot's eyes sharpened subtly. "Ah, and what was the topic of their disagreement?" Clara hesitated, eyes flickering to Flint as though awaiting punishment. Poirot gently turned Flint slightly aside with a gesture. "You speak to me only," he assured her. Clara whispered, "It was about a letter, something written to Lord Ravenshaw. My lady said it should be burned. She begged him to get rid of it, to protect them both." Poirot leaned in. "To protect them both? What could a letter contain that threatens husband and wife alike?" Clara's lips trembled. I do not know. I truly do not. But my lady cried. Real tears. She said it would ruin them." Flint scoffed. "Sounds like guilt." Poirot silenced him with a glance. "Continue, mademoiselle." Clara nodded gratefully. "Lord Ravenshaw refused. He said destruction is cowardice, that he would rather face consequence than surrender his name. I heard him shout, 'If I burn it, I am no better than the villains.'" Poirot inhaled slowly, the missing paper taking new dimension in his mind. A letter not of business only, nor politics alone, but one with power to destroy both reputation and relationship. "What happened then?" Poirot asked. Clara hesitated again. "Before we departed, I went to fetch my lady's coat. I passed the study. The door was ajar. Lord Ravenshaw was sealing something in an envelope. He slammed it shut when he saw me, then locked it in the safe. He looked frightened." Poirot pressed, And when you left, did Lady Eleanor appear concerned still? Yes, sir, Clara whispered. When she stepped into the carriage, she trembled. She whispered, "It will be the end if he keeps it." Flint grunted. A motive, if there ever was one. Poirot held up a hand. Mademoiselle, one final question. Did Lady Eleanor possess the combination to the safe? Clara looked horrified, yet truthful. No, she never knew it. Lord Ravenshaw trusted only one man with such things besides himself. Poirot's brow lifted. Marcus Ellery. Clara nodded. Yes, the lawyer. Still trembling, she added, Lady Eleanor feared the letter, but she could not reach it. Only Mr. Ellery or Lord Ravenshaw could have taken it. Poirot rose, offering Clara a respectful bow. You have been most helpful. I assure you, you have served your lady well. Tears slid down Clara's cheeks, but relief hovered behind them. She had given truth, if not answers. In the hall once more, Flint grumbled, so the widow had motive, but not the means. Ellery had means, but not a clear motive. Poirot's eyes sparkled. Ah, but motive may be hidden inside the missing letter, and means may disguise itself as innocence. We now look at not only who benefits from Lord Ravenshaw's death, but who suffers most from his survival. Flint frowned. You think his staying alive would ruin someone? Poirot nodded gently. Yes. And perhaps that someone feared exposure, feared a scandal greater than murder. Poirot glanced upward, as though the very walls had ears. We must find that letter. And before we do, we must read the document that Lord Ravenshaw left for the moment of his death. He held the sealed envelope retrieved from the safe earlier, the letter marked to be opened only upon Lord Ravenshaw's death. Poirot tapped it thoughtfully. The dead speak, mon ami, and we must listen. Chapter 6. The Letter of the Dead. The parlour was quiet enough to hear the faint settling of dust. Hercule Poirot sat upright at a small walnut table, the sealed envelope before him like a waiting ghost. The air in the Ravenshaw townhouse had thickened, not with sorrow now, but with anticipation. Sergeant Flint hovered behind him like a restless shadow. Poirot examined the envelope gently, as though handling fragile bones. Written in precise, slanted ink across its front, to be opened only in the event of my death. Flint fidgeted. Well then, he's dead. Let's hear what the poor devil had to say. Poirot did not respond. Instead, he quietly slit open the seal with a letter knife, unfolding a single sheet. The handwriting was neat, forceful, Lord Ravenshaw's voice given form in ink. Poirot began to read aloud. To whomever holds this, know that I expect my death at the hands of a power far greater than a single foe. I have uncovered corruption within the Parliamentary Committee for Imperial Investments. Men of influence deal death for profit. Should this letter be silenced, know the committee has acted to secure its empire of extortion. If I fall, it shall be because I refuse to be bought. One among my circle has already betrayed me. Whether for greed, blackmail, or fear, I do not know. But their silence is the noose awaiting me. Seek the truth in the ledger of foreign accounts. Seek the signature that should not exist. It will reveal the traitor. Alistair Ravenshaw. Flint's eyes widened. Corruption! Murder by a whole committee! So we're not after one killer. We're after wolves in Parliament. Poirot folded the letter carefully. Perhaps. But wolves do not all bite at once, Sergeant. No committee strangles a man in his home. One hand delivers the poison. He paused, his gaze turning thoughtful. Lord Ravenshaw may have faced a great enemy, but the killer is someone close enough to fear that letter more than any empire. Flint leaned against the mantel. Ellery, then, the safe, the documents, the panic. Poirot shook his head. Do not rush. The maid spoke truth. Lady Eleanor could not access the safe. Monsieur Ellery could. Yet his panic may not be guilt, but fear. Fear of being implicated, fear of losing reputation, fear of exposure if he appears connected. Flint frowned. So who's left? Poirot's voice softened. We must consider not just who could open the safe, but who knew what was inside. At that moment, the parlour door opened. A woman stepped in. Tall, charcoal hair sharply cut, clad in a tailored coat of midnight blue. Her countenance was severe, bearing the expression of one who had seen battles of politics and principle. Lady Eleanor followed behind her, apprehensive. Eleanor spoke first. Monsieur Poirot, this is Lady Frances Havisham, member of the same committee. She insisted on visiting. Lady Havisham's stare cut straight to the letter in Poirot's hand. Then it is true, she said, her voice low, taut. He is dead, and now the vultures will tear each other apart. Flint bristled. You know something, ma'am. She ignored him. Her gaze remained fixed on Poirot. Lord Ravenshaw was a good man. He discovered something the committee wished buried. I warned him. He would not relent. Poirot's brow rose delicately. You warned him? How kind of a committee member to protect a threat to her own circle. Havisham exhaled sharply. Not all of us are corrupted, Monsieur Poirot, but those who are would do anything to keep their silence intact. Poirot nodded slowly. Then tell me, madame, who among them has the most to lose? Lady Havisham hesitated. Not fear, calculation. If you expose the wrong man, Poirot, you will not survive this investigation. Poirot's eyes glittered. Madame, I have survived bullets, bombs, and the English breakfast. Your committee does not frighten me. Lady Eleanor gasped faintly, torn between anxiety and awe. Havisham gave a shadow of a smile. Very well, I shall not say more yet, but I will give you this. The ledger Ravenshaw spoke of is not in his possession. He entrusted it to someone he believed loyal. Flint scoffed. Ellery again. Lady Havisham shook her head. No, not Ellery. He suspected the lawyer would fold under pressure. He gave it to someone far less obvious. Poirot leaned forward, eyes bright. Who? Lady Havisham's lips curved ever so slightly. To someone who knows nothing of politics. Someone who would not know its value. Someone you would not look at twice. Eleanor's hand rose to her mouth. The realization struck her before Poirot spoke the name aloud. Clara Whitby, he said softly. The maid, the innocent, the overlooked. Lady Havisham nodded. Find her before they do. You are already too late if they know. Poirot stood immediately, the polished urgency of purpose returning to his stride. Sergeant Flint, we must protect the girl. Flint grabbed his coat. Protect her from who? Poirot paused at the doorway, his voice quiet but resolute. From the one who silenced Lord Ravenshaw, the one who fears that ledger more than death itself. Chapter 7. The Whispered Confession. 1,000 words. Rain had begun to whisper against the glass roof of the London Townhouse atrium when Hercule Poirot requested all remaining suspects to gather in the library. The storm outside seemed only a polite echo of the storm of tension gathering within. Lady Adeline stood stiffly near the fireplace, her fingers clenched around a silk handkerchief. Inspector Graves leaned against a bookshelf, pretending indifference but watching every twitch with hawk-like precision. Beatrice Duval sat elegantly in a wing chair, impossibly calm. In contrast, Sebastian Wren paced near the Globe Bar, like a man afraid to be still. Poirot entered last, carrying only a small notebook and a silver letter opener he now held delicately between his fingers, more like a conductor's baton than a weapon. My friends, he said softly, it is time we speak with order. Too much noise has clouded the truth, and like fog on the Thames, it obscures what is beneath. Let us now clear it away." The room seemed to hold its breath. Poirot set the silver letter opener on the centre table. This, as you know, belonged to the late Sir Aldrich Cavendish, but what is less known is that it is not merely an ornament. See here? He pressed a panel near the hilt. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a tiny folded note. Gasps rippled through the room. Inspector Graves stepped forward. "You never mentioned—" "No, because I wished to see how each of you reacted when it was revealed," Poirot replied. "Impatience is most useful, mon ami, but only when used at precisely the right moment." With gloved precision, he withdrew the paper. It bore a few lines written in Sir Aldrich's hand. "If anything befalls me, the truth lies in the ledger. Only one has reason to fear it. Mark the final entry." Sebastian Wren froze mid-step. Lady Adeline dropped her handkerchief. Beatrice's eyes narrowed like a cat sensing danger. Inspector Graves moved closer, eyes flicking toward the suspects. "The ledger," Sebastian muttered, throat tight. "You found it?" Poirot smiled gently. "Indeed, and I know who altered it." "Sir Aldrich's financial records are thorough," Poirot continued. "They reveal not only business profits, but a series of private loans. A man this wealthy could ruin anyone with a single demand of repayment. Yet he forgave most debts. Why? Because he liked to control people, not destroy them. Debt was his leash." He turned to Sebastian Wren. "You owed him more than money, did you not? He owned your contract, your reputation, your very future. You felt trapped, oui?" Sebastian's lips trembled. "You don't understand. He wasn't just controlling me. He was exploiting my work. He sold my inventions, kept the credit and the profits. He said if I complained, he would ruin me publicly, call me a fraud." Poirot nodded sympathetically. "You were angry, but not murderous. You struck him only after his death, did you not? In desperation, to remove evidence linking your work to him." Inspector Graves stared at Sebastian, astonished. "Is that true?" Sebastian swallowed. "I wasn't thinking. I panicked when I saw him dead. I thought someone else had killed him, but the debt documents, if the police found them, my career would be over. I only tried to protect myself. I didn't kill him." Poirot tapped the notebook. "Your fear explains the missing papers, but it does not make you a killer." Sebastian's knees buckled. He collapsed into the nearest chair, trembling with relief and shame. Beatrice exhaled slowly, confident eyes locking back onto Poirot, as though watching a master performance. "And now," Poirot began, turning to Lady Adeline, "we must speak of you." Her spine stiffened. "This is absurd. I am his widow. He was my husband." "Just so," Poirot said. "A husband who did not love you, who kept lovers and flaunted them shamelessly. A man who would not grant you divorce because he could not bear to lose his fortune. Your marriage was misery, humiliation, and despair. You had motive most clear of all." Adeline's pale face darkened. Tears welled. "He ruined my life, Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "but I did not take his." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "I believe you." Inspector Graves blinked. "You do?" "Oui," Poirot said, eyes narrowing, "because Sir Aldrich did not fear his wife. His note says only one feared the ledger. Lady Adeline had no debt. She was trapped, but not desperate." A slow panic spread across Beatrice's face. Poirot turned at last to Beatrice Duval. She had been poised all evening, a mask of elegant silence. Now her breath had quickened. Her fingers twitched on the armrest. The calm was slipping. "You were Sir Aldrich's mistress," Poirot said quietly, "but you were also more than that. You were his spy, his negotiator, his collector of infidelities and secrets. A woman who knows how to play roles. A woman who understands leverage. He leaned in slightly. And a woman who appeared at the townhouse before anyone summoned you. How curious! Beatrice's voice cracked. I was invited. No. Sir Aldrich cancelled your visit 2 days before his death. His secretary confirmed it. You came without invitation. You came with intent. You feared the ledger, mademoiselle, for in it your own frauds were recorded, debts you hid, investments you manipulated. Sir Aldrich was planning to expose you. Beatrice stood slowly, like a queen refusing to bow. He was going to ruin me. Yes, Poirot replied softly, and so you ruined him first. The storm outside thundered. Inspector Graves stepped forward. Beatrice Duval, you are under arrest. Not yet, Poirot interrupted sharply. We still lack one final proof, and it is here, in this room. He pointed toward the staircase beyond the library. Hidden where only the killer would think to place it. Beatrice froze. Lady Adeline gasped. Sebastian trembled. Inspector Graves stared at Poirot in disbelief. What is it, Poirot? He demanded. Poirot smiled. A single object soaked with truth. Chapter 8. The Hidden Blade. 1,000 words. A crack of thunder rolled distantly over London as Poirot led the group from the library into the dim corridor beyond. Candle sconces cast pale flickers along the wall, creating trembling shadows like silent spectators following their every step. Beatrice walked last, guarded now by Inspector Graves, her elegance shattered. She moved stiffly, her chin trembling though she tried to hold it high. Lady Adeline trailed behind Poirot, her expression caught somewhere between grief and fascination. Sebastian Wren wiped rain from his brow as they passed the glass door leading into the atrium, his nervousness still clinging like a second skin. This way, mes amis, Poirot murmured, ascending the staircase. How can the murder weapon be hidden upstairs? Graves grumbled behind him. Poirot did not answer. His polished shoes clicked rhythmically on each step, a precise cadence, as though even his footsteps were part of a greater deduction. He stopped on the second-floor landing before a narrow door set between two grand portraits of long-dead Cavendishes. This room, Poirot said softly, was used only once today, by the murderer. Beatrice spoke, voice tight. Poirot, this is absurd, I never. Patience, mademoiselle, he replied gently, cutting her off. With a flourish, he opened the small door. The door revealed what seemed to be an ordinary washroom. A small mirror, a marble sink, and a velvet-covered bench. But Poirot walked straight toward the window. Rain rattled against the glass pane. He reached behind the curtain, fingers searching along the sill as if caressing a clue only he could feel. Then he withdrew his hand. In it lay a slender blade, its hilt jeweled, its tip faintly tarnished. Blood darkened the ornate carving. Inspector Graves inhaled sharply. Dear God! Poirot laid the dagger on a hand towel, immaculate despite its deadly stain. This is the true murder weapon, not a letter opener. A stiletto blade, sharp, easily concealed, and with a narrow edge made for precise killing. The room fell silent, except for the storm. Beatrice's voice cracked. You have no proof that I ever touched it. Poirot turned slowly. Au contraire, mademoiselle. You handled it in haste. You hid it here while in shock and fear, but in your panic you forgot something small, yet large enough for one with the eyes of Hercule Poirot. He pointed toward the mirror above the sink. A faint smear, almost invisible, clung to the lower edge. Rouge, a smudged fingerprint, a delicate red cosmetic stain. Beatrice gasped. She instinctively brought her hand to her mouth, her lips painted the identical shade. Inspector Graves stepped forward. "Beatrice Duval, you are—" "Not yet," Poirot interrupted again. Graves flushed. "Monsieur Poirot, how much more can you possibly need?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The truth, always, mon ami, in its entirety." Poirot turned to Beatrice. His voice softened now. "No mocking, no theatrics. You were not merely Sir Aldrich's mistress. You hoped to become his wife. You expected him to divorce Lady Adeline. You believed you would inherit his influence, his wealth, and a more respectable future." Beatrice squeezed her eyes shut. Tears formed, but they shimmered like anger, not sorrow. "He promised me," she whispered. "He said everything would belong to me. Then he laughed at me. Said he would marry someone younger, that I was no investment, merely a decoration. He was going to expose my debts, ruin me, discard me." Lady Adeline looked away, pain and pity blending like wine in water. "So," Poirot said gently, "fury consumed reason." "No," Beatrice whispered hoarsely, "not fury, strategy. He ruined. Women for sport. I would not become another broken one." She straightened, eyes like wet glass. "So I took his blade and ended his game." Her voice did not tremble now. She looked less like a mistress and more like an executioner. Sebastian shuddered. Lady Adeline covered her mouth. Even Graves hesitated. Poirot inclined his head. "You acted out of justice, twisted by desperation. But murder, mademoiselle, is always a losing game." Graves slowly reached for her wrists. Beatrice raised her chin defiantly. "You will regret imprisoning me," she hissed. "London breeds men like Cavendish like rats. I rid the world of one. I should be thanked." Poirot's expression fell to melancholy, not judgment. "Perhaps you believe so. But justice cannot be taken like a dagger to the throat. If it becomes personal, it ceases to be justice. It becomes ego. And ego, mademoiselle, killed him as surely as your blade." Beatrice's shoulders slumped. Something in her eyes broke. Graves led her toward the staircase. Lightning flared outside the window, illuminating her silhouette as she descended into ruin. Sebastian, shaking, whispered, "So it's over. The murderer confessed." Poirot did not answer immediately. He stared at the blood-stained blade. Then he murmured, "No, something is wrong. There is a detail still out of balance." He turned suddenly to Lady Adeline. "You told us you were upstairs before anyone found the body. And yet, how did you know where it was found?" Lady Adeline froze. The storm roared louder. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The widow knows more than she has said. Chapter 9. The Widow's Secret. Silence closed around the corridor like an icy fist. Lady Adeline stood motionless at the centre, her pale silk gown shimmering faintly beneath the wavering glow of the sconces. The others had gone. Beatrice escorted downstairs by Inspector Graves, Sebastian trembling in the library. Now only Poirot and the widow remained on the upper landing, face to face beneath the ancestral portraits of the Cavendish line. Raindrops battered the tall windows with mounting fury, as if the storm itself wished to witness the truth. Lady Adeline's throat tightened. "Monsieur Poirot, surely you do not believe I killed him?" Poirot's voice was calm, steady. "I believe, madame, that your grief has been most peculiar. Not a widow's anguish, but the anxiety of one who hides something." Her eyes flickered, a flash of panic quickly suppressed. "I lost a husband. Is that not enough to explain distress?" Poirot stepped nearer, lowering his voice. "No, not when the husband was cruel, dismissive, unfaithful. A woman who hates her husband may grieve his death differently. Perhaps not at all." Lady Adeline's face drained of colour. "You are suggesting I am glad he is dead," she whispered. Poirot's gaze sharpened. I'm suggesting, madame, that you were not surprised. Poirot raised his notebook. When the body was discovered, you cried out that he was lying slumped at his desk. Yet you claimed you had been in the music room. No one had described the scene to you. How, I ask, did you know precisely how he was found? Adeline's hand trembled against the banister. Perhaps someone said it. No, Poirot interrupted quietly. In shock, the others gave no details. I listened. Her breath stuttered. She stepped backward, as if the truth itself approached like a hound. I did not kill Aldrich, she whispered. Poirot nodded. I believe you. But you did see him dead before the others arrived. Adeline's lips parted, then closed again. The storm rattled the glass. Poirot continued softly. You went to him before anyone else. Your marriage was miserable, and yet some tiny piece of you still cared. You saw him dead, and you chose silence. Why? Lady Adeline swallowed painfully. Because they would have thought I did it. Her voice cracked like thin glass. Poirot waited, letting silence coax her confession. She sank onto a chair by the staircase, fingers gripping the wood as if she might fall away entirely. It was just after luncheon. I wished to confront him about a letter I found. A cruel letter. He mocked me, mocked our marriage, mocked my age and my family's fortune that he once so eagerly pursued. Tears welled, but these were not dramatic or hysterical. They were quiet, exhausted tears of a woman who had long endured humiliation. I couldn't bear the insults any more, she whispered. I went to demand respect at the very least, but when I entered his study, he was already dead, his head against the desk. At first I thought he had fainted, and then I saw the blood. Poirot nodded slightly, encouraging her. I panicked. I ran out. But then I realized if I raised the alarm, the police would assume I did it. I had motive, and everyone knew it. She wiped her cheek with trembling fingers. So I hid the letter and said nothing. Poirot's brows lifted. You hid a letter? Her eyes widened with the realization she'd revealed too much. Yes, her voice was a whisper. I still have it. Poirot extended his hand. After a long moment, she reached into the folds of her gown and withdrew a crumpled envelope. Poirot opened it carefully. The contents, though venomous, did not suggest murder, only cruelty. A marital taunt from a miserable man. He folded it neatly. Thank you, madame. You did not kill your husband, but someone else knew that letter existed, someone else feared it, and someone else sought to ensure that Sir Aldrich never used it. Adeline blinked in confusion. Who? Poirot rose, his face settling into grave certainty. The person who gained most, not from his life, but from his death. Sebastian Wren had debts. Beatrice had desperation. Adeline had hatred. But only one stood to inherit wealth, reputation, and power without suspicion. Poirot whispered, almost to himself, the single beneficiary, the one man Sir Aldrich trusted enough to sign over responsibilities. A man who called himself loyal, who was present at every moment, yet almost invisible. Lady Adeline frowned. You mean Inspector Graves? Poirot shook his head. No, madame, not he. He turned toward the staircase, eyes narrowing. Sir Aldrich's personal secretary, the quiet man who arranges his affairs, the only person who truly knew all financial signatures, all private records, all debts, all leverage, a man who could alter the ledger, forge documents, redirect assets, a man no one ever suspects. Poirot's voice grew dark, final. Mr. Edwin Carlyle. The name fell like thunder. Chapter 10. The Truth Unveiled. The London fog pressed against the windows of the Ravenshaw townhouse like a living shroud, as though the city itself waited for justice to be declared. Hercule Poirot paced slowly in the drawing-room, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. Around him were gathered Lady Adeline, Sebastian Wren, Inspector Graves, and a visibly tense Edwin Carlyle, the secretary whose quiet demeanour had masked his dangerous cunning. Beatrice Duval, in cuffs, had been temporarily detained elsewhere. The storm outside seemed to echo her desperation, a distant percussion to the events that had led them here. Poirot's small dark eyes glimmered with certainty. "Mes amis," he began softly, "we have examined motives, means, and opportunities. We have uncovered hidden letters, secret ledgers, and most importantly, the behaviour of those who thought themselves invisible. Tonight, the truth shall stand like the morning sun piercing the fog." He paused, letting the weight of anticipation settle over the room. Poirot turned to Carlyle. "Monsieur, you were Sir Aldrich's trusted secretary. You had access to his safe, his documents, and his most private records. You knew the contents of the letter that Lady Adeline found, the ledger that contained debts, loans, and signatures that could ruin lives. You knew who feared exposure the most, and that knowledge became your power." Carlyle's face paled. He shifted uneasily. I merely managed the accounts. I am loyal. Poirot raised a hand. "You are loyal to no one, monsieur. Not to Sir Aldrich, not to the widow, not to the mistress. You were loyal only to yourself. You calculated every move, every moment, to ensure that the one who could expose you would be eliminated." Graves stepped forward. "Are you accusing him of murder?" Poirot nodded. "Oui. Observe the dagger discovered in the upstairs powder room. Only someone who knew Sir Aldrich's habits, knew the location where he would be alone, could have planted it and manipulated the discovery." Lady Adeline gasped, clutching her hands. Sebastian Wren muttered, "It was him all along?" Poirot's gaze sharpened. Monsieur Carlyle removed Sir Aldrich's vital, papers, forged entries in the ledger, manipulated Beatrice's desperation to create confusion, and attempted to make the widow and others appear guilty, all to cover his embezzlement, and all to secure personal advantage over Sir Aldrich's estate and political influence. Carlyle's composure cracked. "You have no proof!" he snapped. "You can't—" Poirot smiled faintly, reaching into his coat. He withdrew the real ledger, intact. "Ah, but the ledger itself is proof, monsieur. Entries forged in haste, cross-checked and corrected by a meticulous observer. The little grey cells, monsieur. See what the human eye may overlook." Poirot placed the ledger on the table. Each hand trembled slightly as he opened it. "Observe," he said, tracing the inked entries with a delicate finger. "All transactions appear normal, except these." He pointed to specific dates and amounts. "Forgeries inserted to make debts appear legitimate, and signatures altered to suggest manipulation by others. You see, Monsieur Carlyle, in your attempt to conceal theft, you revealed everything." Carlyle's face turned ashen. It was just bookkeeping mistakes." "Non, monsieur," Poirot interrupted, voice firm. "Deliberate deception. And in your haste to control the outcome, you allowed the ledger to remain partially visible to Sir Aldrich's loyal maid. She unknowingly became a witness to your schemes." Graves shook his head in disbelief. "You mean Clara?" "Yes," Poirot said. "The innocent observer who feared nothing because she knew nothing at the time. But now, with proper guidance, her testimony confirms the manipulations, proving your guilt beyond doubt." Carlyle slumped into a chair, his mask of confidence broken. I only meant to protect my position," he stammered. "He would have ruined me, all the years of service. I didn't plan to kill him, only to silence him. I gave the stiletto to Beatrice. I hoped she would take action, as she was desperate. I did not foresee." Poirot's eyes glimmered with understanding. You manipulated events so that others' fears and passions would serve your purpose. But in the end, your own ambition betrayed you. Every move was calculated, yet every human weakness you underestimated became a clue. Lady Adeline whispered, "So he used Beatrice and I—" "Oui, madame," Poirot said gently. "You acted from instinct and misunderstanding. Beatrice acted from desperation, but the one who orchestrated the chain of events, who hid, forged, and manipulated, was Edwin Carlyle." Inspector Graves stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Edwin Carlyle, you are under arrest for the murder of Sir Aldrich Cavendish, and for fraud and forgery." Carlyle's shoulders slumped. It was never meant to end like this. Poirot tilted his head, expression serene. "Intentions are rarely as important as outcomes, monsieur. Justice, however delayed, arrives regardless." The household exhaled collectively. Sebastian Wren trembled in relief. Lady Adeline sank into a chair, exhausted yet oddly liberated. Beatrice, though detained, no longer seemed dangerous. Her desperation had been manipulated, not her inherent nature. Clara Whitby entered quietly, holding a small tray. Poirot's eyes softened as he nodded to her. The smallest observation can illuminate the darkest of deeds. Your loyalty, your innocence, have helped restore balance, mademoiselle. The storm outside began to relent, rain softening into gentle taps against the windows. London, as if acknowledging the resolution, seemed to breathe. Poirot finally stood at the centre of the room, gaze sweeping across the assembled group. "We have witnessed greed, desperation, and passion. Yet reason, logic, and the little grey cells have triumphed. Let this serve as a reminder. The truth may be hidden, but it cannot be extinguished. One day, it always emerges, like the sun piercing the London fog." The room remained quiet. Outside, the first timid glimmers of dawn streaked across the grey sky, brushing against the edges of the tall windows like tentative hope. Poirot placed the ledger back into the safe, locked it carefully, and turned to the group. "Mes amis, the case is concluded. Justice, though imperfect, has been served. Let us hope the lessons learned here guide our hearts as well as our minds." And with that, Hercule Poirot, ever precise and quietly triumphant, departed for the day, leaving the household to reconcile grief, relief, and the lingering shadows of secrets finally laid bare.